Peace and risings to you all, and welcome back to yet another video. So I have not been on here for a little while, as the energies these past 2 weeks have been insane. And I know I probably say that every single week, but I think it's safe to say that things are just going to continue getting weirder and weirder. And one thing that I have learned personally, or at least lessons that I have been learning and will continue to learn, is that the world has changed and the world is continuing to change. And we can certainly not operate in the same ways that we used to. And for me, who used to be someone who was very much a doer, who was always trying to control everything. And of course, in time, I realized that this was all out of fear. And a big part of my journey has been, and I guess it's the same for many of us, is learning to surrender to the unseen realm. And now that was definitely not something that was easy for me. And if you're on this video, then perhaps you also resonate with that. But it isn't easy letting go of control. I mean, to be honest, we've lied to ourselves for a very long time, pretending that we had things under control, but we've never really had things under control. The world will continue to move us in the way the world wants us to move, and the Most High, the universe, the energies of the cosmos, all of these things are having a much larger impact on what happens in our lives and what happens in the world around us. And to think that these energies do not have influence over us is silly. Just like we see how the moon impacts the ocean, it is also impacting us. And I guess, why am I feeling called to say this? Well, I guess because in the past 2 weeks, we experienced, well, actually more so last week, I think it was at the time of recording this video, was really, so we experienced the full moon, the full blood moon, and it was actually quite incredible because this was also a lunar eclipse where, you know, every time, I mean, there are always lunar eclipses, but it always seems that these lunar eclipses are visible in the northern hemisphere, where people always seem to be seeing them in America and Europe and God knows where else. But for once, what was very exciting is that we could see it from the African continent. And I mean, to look up and to see the sky and the moon, rather, should I say, blood red, was really quite a remarkable phenomena. But it's quite interesting because some people say that it was a good omen, but when we turn to the indigenous people, it seems that many of them saw this as a negative omen. So I'd be interested to hear from you guys in the comments as to what you felt about this eclipse and whether you felt it was a good or a bad omen. Personally, I can't really say, but I have to admit that when I was looking at it in this blood moon, I had to say that it did feel quite ominous, and it did feel quite eerie. Even as I saw this shadow crossing the moon, I remember thinking, what exactly is this shadow that is crossing the moon? And yes, of course, science will say it was the shadow of the Earth, because Earth was directly in between the sun and the moon, and therefore Earth's shadow was casting a shadow on the moon. But I remember thinking, you know, I wonder what in biblical times they would have thought about these things. And so I can totally see why the indigenous people would say that it was a negative omen, and especially with that blood red color. But personally, what I do feel, and the energies that I felt, was that this is, I guess, a time of judgment. And I know I've been saying that, and I've said that in many other videos, and I guess this time of judgment is the time that we are living in. And many times I have said that we are literally living in the story of the book of Revelations, where Revelations, again, is to be revealing something. And as we look at the world around us, I think it is safe to say that many hidden truths are being revealed all over the world, and this is a good thing. And the powers that are falling, of course, they have maintained control And a big part of how they have maintained control over humanity for so long, and especially in more recent times, is through the media, because they manipulate the narratives. And so, you know, I don't really know much to say about the blood moon specifically, but what I do want to bring attention to is to the fact that it was in the sign of Pisces. And in astrology, the sky is divided into the 12 main zodiac signs and the 12 main houses. So considering that this was taking place in the the sign of Pisces is represents Pisces being the 12th sign of the zodiac. So that is the end of the wheel. We start in Aries and we move all the way around to complete a cycle in Pisces. So the fact that this was in the 12th sign, and that Pisces is the sign of endings, completions, and then 2 days later we had the 999 portal. And as I said in a video earlier this year, that 9, considering that we are in 2025, which numerologically comes down to a 9, which is the number of cycles ending. So to have 999 after 2 days after the full moon, and interestingly, the full moon took place on a 7. The 7 in numerology is one of the most spiritual numbers, in that it relates to seeking truth and seeking spiritual truth. So very interesting numerology there, in that we were in the 12th house on the 7th, and Pisces is one of the more spiritual signs, also relating to emotions. So yes, a lot of information, and then on top of it, to look at the nodes of the moon. So in astrology, we have the north node and the south node, and the north node represents the guiding star, the guiding direction. And so we each individually have our north nodes placed somewhere, but then we also have our south node. So the south node represents the energies that we have come in with. So I guess one has to be in alignment with reincarnation, but I like to use astrology in terms of, because astrology, when we look at our birth charts, it gives us a roadmap of what our soul came here to experience. And when we know the direction that we're supposed to move in, we're not going to waste time by being deviated and going in all kinds of other directions which are not the directions that we're supposed to be moving in. So the north node represents the direction that we are moving in. So we have our individual north nodes and we have the collective north node. So now the collective north node was in the sign of Pisces, just a few degrees off where this full moon eclipse was taking place. So if we had the north node in the sign of Pisces, Pisces, as we saw, being a spiritual sign, which is about being more connected to the unseen realms. Pisces is dominated by the planet Neptune, and Neptune is the planet of illusion, so that we cannot see. So we as a collective are being pushed to move away from South Node in Virgo, South Node being an earth sign, which is very logical, very practical, very methodical, very much we have to have rules and we have to have structure. And not to say that that's a negative thing, but what this blood moon eclipse was showing us in this full moon is that we as a collective are being asked to move away from very tangible, analytical ways of moving through the world and surrendering to the unseen spiritual realm. Because what is taking place is everyone talks about humanity going through an awakening. Yes, we are going through an awakening, but people sometimes throw words around, not necessarily knowing what that truly means. And what is happening is that we are awakening to a higher level of consciousness. We are moving out of being so focused on the physical, because remember, as human beings, we are soul beings, non-tangible soul beings having a physical human experience. And so we are being given the opportunity to remember that we cannot live our lives on this physical plane dominated only by the material realm, but that we need to bring them into a state of balance where essentially we are drawing from both the spiritual and the physical realm, because we as human beings are the bridge between the spiritual and the physical, because we have the ability to access the unseen realm, ground it through our body, and and essentially manifest it into the physical material world. So these are the energies. I guess this is the energy, the context from which these cards are being pulled. And every week when I pull these cards, the message is always the same. What messages do I need to share with the collective? So these are the messages which are apparently the most important for you to receive at this time, and which will help you as you continue navigating and moving forward. But just know that something massive has shifted, and these things have shifted both internally, individually for us, but also collectively, because whatever is happening in the collective is always a manifestation of what is happening in many individual people. So we have to always look at what we see in the outside world, what we see playing out on the global stage, which is affecting and impacting millions and billions of people, is also happening within us. And so it's interesting because also this past week we've seen a lot of revolution taking place. I mean, look at what just took place in Nepal, where the Gen Zs literally overthrew their government and within 4 days had somehow managed to choose a new government, or should I say, choose a new ruler to be put in place that they voted for themselves. And somehow the citizens managed to come together and start cleaning up the streets and even bringing back things that had been looted in the process of the revolution. And so this is miraculous to see, really, and especially that to see the Nepalese, because I mean, the Nepalese are very connected to Buddhism and the roots. I mean, I guess part of the root teachings within Buddhism is that expectation is suffering. And anyways, let me not deviate off course and get too much into that. But the fact that they were able, through their frustration, they managed to come together and do something about what they were frustrated about. So this really shows that when collectively we come together, and I guess the Nepalis are different because they are a lot more spiritually inclined than a lot of other nations. And so they were able to get their shit together because they were all driven by something pulling them in the spiritual realms. And so this really shows that as a collective, we keep trying to, yes, our problems can be seen in the physical realm, and we keep trying to fix our problems in the physical realm, not realizing, or should I say, often forgetting, that what rules the physical realm is the non-tangible realm. So it is all about energy and frequency. And so when we get our energies in check, when we are able to all elevate and find each other on the same frequency, then things begin to shift. So anyways, let's get into the cards and see what messages we have to see today. So the first card we have here is Sorcerer's Apprentice. Ready for new teachings, learning through mistakes, learning to be humble. And so what really is coming through, so let me show you the image on the card. So just what I'm being called to this image here, which makes me think of the wheel of the zodiac, and with the color blue, which is very resonance with Pisces, which is water. These energies that have recently come through are pulling us into new teachings. We are ready for new teachings. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation with my sister the other day and realizing, we were discussing how, spiritual, when we look at in ancient times, let's look at, for example, the Egyptian mystery schools. The Egyptian mystery schools, people were put through, it was literally like a school. You had to go through like a whole year of study before you could move up to the next level. And that is because if people didn't have the right foundational knowledge to receive the information and the spiritual wisdom at the higher level, then it would be completely misunderstood and misconstrued. And that could then lead to problems, because when people are being given access to information, but they don't have the right foundation from which to receive that information can end up causing them more harm than good. And so I guess with the Sorcerer's Apprentice is that we have all been being initiated one level into the next. And especially when I think COVID was a time of great initiation, when people were being given a chance to stop on their hamster wheel of always going round and round in circles and take a moment to really just process everything that had been going on in their lives, because we as a collective had been running and running and running and running round this hamster wheel, not really taking time to stop and question, is this really the direction we should be moving in? Because when we stop to look at the state of the world, and after that pause, I think it's safe to say that everything in the world has just been chaotic. And it's almost like 2020 was the year where we were breaking open the seal of all the shit that we had swept under the proverbial rug, and that seal was now broken, forcing people to now look and deal with stuff face on. Because, you know, as human beings like to say, if we don't see, then we don't believe. And so people were very able to just ignore. And because all these problems that we see in our world today, this is not a today problem. These are repercussions from years and years and years and years and years of us seeing the wound festering, but not doing anything about it, just continuing to push it, being like, oh yeah, it's okay. And essentially one generation kept on pushing it to the next generation, and now we're at a point where we can no longer ignore the big fat elephant in the room. We have to do something about it. And so yes, we are ready for new teachings. We have learned through our mistakes. We have certainly learnt to be humble, remembering that we are never the ones in control. The universe and the Most High are the ones controlling everything that is taking place. So at this time, we are being asked to be more like a mountain. We have climbed to the top of the mountain, and now we are being asked to sit at the top of the mountain and to receive the information that we are receiving. So it says here, being grounded, connections between the earth and the heavens. Take your time. Yes, you know, it's like when you take time when people take time to climb the mountain to reach the peak. I mean, most of the time that climb is hard and it's uncomfortable, and maybe there's a lot of complaining going on. I guess, I mean, it's just taking me back to the times when I used to have to do a shitload of walking as a child, and I'd be like, oh my God, are we nearly there? Are we nearly there? And well, we've all been waiting to get there, but what if I were to tell you we are now there? We have arrived wherever it was that we have been trying to arrive. And so now we just need to be here. Because as humanity, we're always striving, always moving forward. But sometimes we just need to chill the fuck out and enjoy the fact that now we are at the summit, and now we can just be. We can just relax. We can just receive the information, move slower. But the thing is, we're constantly being told, no, you need to keep moving. No. Right now, we just need to pause, and we need to just take stock of everything that we have been through in order to get to this place. Because if we don't stop and acknowledge everything that we have been through, if we don't stop and just be for a moment, we miss everything that we have accomplished, everything that we have succeeded, everything that we have been through, and all the things that we have learned. So the next card we have is Bat, finding your way in the dark. Use your other senses, trusting your echo. Yes, it kind of feels that we are all in the dark. And, you know, the more I speak to people around me, everyone is a bit confused and feeling a bit lost and not really knowing how to move forward. And that's because we're not quite in the new world, but we're not in the old world. And so we're still straddling, but we're getting more and more close, and we've been straddling for a while, but now we're at a point where we're so much closer to the new world that we know we cannot operate in the way that we did before. We have to use our other senses. Before, we were using our analytical, logical mind, South Node Virgo, and now we are being used to trust our other senses, our intuition, our emotions, what our body is telling us, which is more Pisces energy. is trusting the flow of life. And the thing is, our intuition is so much stronger than our analytical mind, because the analytical mind is connected to the conscious mind, whereas our intuition is connected to something so much bigger, something so much deeper. And for those of us who do follow our intuition, and even those of us who don't, how many times did we hear that little voice inside our head saying, oh yeah, blah, 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 and then we ignored it, only to be like, oh damn, I should have listened to that voice. And so this message is here to reaffirm that your intuition is a whisper from your soul, and your soul will never lead you astray. But sometimes the conscious mind will come in and be like, no, 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 that doesn't make sense, because the conscious mind is so limited. Whereas the subconscious mind, which is driven by something so much deeper, the subconscious is like the 90% of that iceberg which is under the water that we can't see. And so when we trust the intuition, it doesn't always make sense to the conscious logical mind, but it can never lead you astray. So trust those senses. Yes, you are moving in the dark, but that is why the Most High gave you those senses to help you move through these times that don't make a lot of sense, because we have been operating on rational, logical material, whereas now we are moving into the subconscious realm, the spiritual realm, and those of us who have not been used to that realm, it can feel very scary and it can feel very unknown. It's like when you go to another country and you don't even read the language. Like, let's say suddenly we're in China and we don't understand the culture, we can't read the writing, we can't really communicate to the other people around us. It's just like, oh my fucking God, where am I? So basically we're in China. So the next card we have here is Black Moon Lilith in Libra. You deserve balance. And interesting, the numerology here is 7. So we experienced that full moon on the 7th of this month. And here we have the number 7. Again, as I mentioned before, 7 is the number of spirituality, the number of truth, being a truth seeker, being a sage, being a spiritual teacher. And so here in Libra, Libra is the sign of balance, but Libra is all about feminine energy. So you see this woman looking at herself in the mirror, admiring her beauty. And essentially what this message is saying is that we have been living in a very masculine, patriarchal, conscious mind, analytical mind, Virgo energy, into more feminine energy, which is what Libra brings us, because Libra is connected to the planet Venus, which is about beauty and harmony and love, all these things that within this matrix system have been essentially deemed not as important. But now we are moving back towards more feminine qualities, towards more Venusian energies, towards more harmony and beauty, and just all those, I don't know, the best way I can explain it is the color pink. You know, it's soft and it's lovely and it's nurturing and it's beautiful. And these are the energies that we are moving towards. We need more balance, moving out of being too much in the masculine. And I'm not saying we need to be more in the feminine. It's simply about balancing between those more logical Virgo traits towards those more feminine Pisces energy. So the next card we have is Adam, dark divine father of creation. And here we have the number 6. So we've gone from 7, Venus, Libra, balance, into 6 with Adam, the dark divine father of creation. And actually I'm feeling called to read what this card says. So we have Adam. So the Adam Oracle card signals a time to heal your dark divine masculine shadow. A shadow that may originate with the father, paternal ancestral patterns, and imbalances in relationships. I think it is safe to say that we all have a father wound, and the father is not necessarily from our father ourselves, but a wounding from being in the shadow aspects of the masculine. This is where there is a lot of dominance, a lot of control. Again, interestingly, I was chatting to my sister this morning in the car, and we were just talking about how you know, it's just crazy how men in their shadow are essentially what women fear more than anything else. And when considering that man and woman were made as divine counterparts and that one party be totally in fear of the other party, something there is very, very wrong. And that is simply the repercussions of an imbalance where the feminine principles and qualities of life have been really suppressed and limited, and therefore the masculine has become rampant and over controlling, operating in the shadow aspects. And that is what the matrix system in which we live is a representation of, is when there is too much masculine and the feminine has been essentially ostracized and pushed to the side. What happens is there is no more nurturing, there is no more love, there is no more harmony. Everything is about control and rigidity and dominance, and we really need to move away from that. So it says Adam's story can show us the toxicity that can develop around power struggles between masculine and feminine and why it's important to heal it within. The Adam Oracle card raises the example of what not to do and encourages you to release toxic masculinity that has held you back in your life. Now, toxic masculinity is, remember, when I talk about masculine and feminine, I'm not talking about man and woman. I'm talking about the different principles and the different energies that exist within each and every one of us. So we all have the capacity to be analytical. We all have the capacity to be intuitive. But now if we are more in the analytical and not at all listening to our intuition, then there is an imbalance, and that will manifest in all the relationships and in everything that we do in our lives. So Adam was the first man and counterpart to both Lilith and Eve. Okay, I'm not really feeling called to read that. So moving on. So really, and then we have, considering that we have the numerology 6 here, 6 in numerology is actually the number of Venus, or the number of harmony, the number of love, the number of unconditional love, the number of togetherness. So yes, when the masculine is not operating from the shadow but operating from divinity, then it's like, the best way I can explain it is a father who really loves his child, and that father will do anything for his child. That the love of a man who is in his power, the support from a man in his power, the encouragement from a man in his power, in his divine power, is a very powerful energy. And so when we talk about when man and woman are in balance with each other, then those relationships will flourish because they are comfortable, because the man is comfortable in his masculine and feminine, whereas the woman is also comfortable in her feminine and masculine, and therefore there is balance. But the problem why man and woman can no longer get along today is because the woman is too busy trying to be man and man is too busy trying to be woman. We have misunderstood the energies and how we are to embody them. So the next card we have is Cloud Walker. So yes, we are being called to walk up above the clouds, to stand. Interesting, this card is right above the mountain, is we are standing at the top of the mountains looking from above the clouds. And when we are standing, grounding at the top of the mountain and seeing from a higher perspective, now we can start to ground new information. Now we start to look at the world through a somewhat different lens, because we are no longer at the bottom of the mountain looking up. We have reached the top of the mountain. We are flying above the mountain. Yes, we're flying blindly, standing, looking over the clouds, and now the perspective from up here looks very, very different. And this is essentially what is happening. It's interesting because in 2017 I had the craziest dream, and still until today I can remember this dream with such clarity. But long story short, that what the message of the dream was, keep rising higher and higher and higher. For the higher you rise, the better perspective you will see what is taking place in the world around us, and therefore it will not be so scary. So we are being asked to look at the world from above the clouds, looking at the world from a more spiritual aspect. And remember, in biblical times, they were always going up to the mountains to pray, because that is where they were closer to the Most High. They had they were closer to the heavens, and that is what is being asked of us, to move higher to the heavens. But even when we move up within our body, moving up into our crown chakra, because the crown chakra is what allows us to communicate with the higher realms. So too many of us have been living in the root at the bottom, and we have been on a journey of moving up into the body, up from the material into the spiritual, and to operate from a place of higher perspective so that we can see the world with clarity. We can overstand what is happening in the world and therefore no longer be dominated by fear, because we overstand that what is happening is for our greatest good, that humanity as a collective is ascending, moving upwards, moving into the higher levels of consciousness that Yeshua spoke of in his teachings. It was about reaching Christ consciousness, reaching a higher level of consciousness where we are in our Christed energy so that we may commune with the Most High. So the next card we have is Veil of Illusion, and we have another 6 here. So, and I want to say that this is the shadow aspect where we have, because we were not in balance with the masculine and feminine, because we have totally removed the feminine from our world, then we have been living under a veil of shadow where we have only been seeing the world from one perspective and from the wrong perspective. Because if you're operating from half the information, it's like if you're only seeing with one eye, yes, you're seeing, but you're not seeing what's happening all the way over here. You only have one perspective. And so remember, we have 2 of everything, 2 eyes, 2 ears, left and right sides of our body, 2 sides of our brain, because yes, we are divided into 2 parts, and it is about bringing us back to wholeness so that we are operating from wholeness once more. And that is what is happening in the world, is that we are coming back into a state of wholeness, coming back into a state of resonance, because we have all been not operating as one being with 2 sides, but we have been operating too much over here or too much over here, forgetting that we are 2 parts of one whole. So the next card we have here is Healthy Boundaries. Yeah, I'm not really sure, but it is about having healthy boundaries. It's like we have been called into the desert and we are standing at the center, and we have created a circle around us to say, you know what, now this is me. I will no longer allow nonsense to infringe on my energy. And I don't know, maybe this is resonant for some of you out there, but I have felt that since 2020 I have been living in a world of a lot of isolation, where I have been somewhat really living in my own bubble. And it seems that, a lot of the people that I know personally have also been experiencing something similar, and maybe you out there have as well. But it's true that we have been living so much in a collective, that we have all just been going along, that we didn't know how to stop and be like, you know what, does this make sense for me individually? Because yes, we operate as a collective, but we also embodied and incarnated alone, because we all have our own path to get to wherever it is that we're going. And so we've needed to be able to check in and disconnect from this somewhat hive mind that a lot of people seemed to be tapped into, and to start questioning, does this make sense for me, or am I just part of some hive mind, is really the best way that I can explain it here. And so now is about coming back to individuality and remembering that we were all made uniquely and individually, because we all had something to bring to the table, and we all came here to have our own unique experience, even though we are part of the collective. So the next card we have here is Resonance of Joy. And yes, now as actually this card makes more sense now, because as we create these healthy boundaries, then we can resonate our joy, because sometimes people have not allowed us to shine as brightly as we were meant to shine. Some of us have been always resonant in joy, but then others came to somewhat, dampen our flame and to to minimize us. Apparently we were shining too brightly for others out there, and as a result of them feeling uncomfortable for our shine, they just continued to pour water on our flame, dampening that flame and making it less and less bright until eventually it became totally extinguished. And now this time of being solo in the desert has been about creating these healthy boundaries and understanding what resonates with you so that you can come back into this resonance of joy. And look at the colors that she is emitting here as she is in her joy, because remember, we are all antennas. We are all emitting frequencies. We are all altars for either darkness or light. And whatever it is that we are emitting from our living altar, that is what we are amplifying out into the collective and therefore making our reality. But as more and more of us resonate in joy rather than in this kind of energy, which is where we were all kept for a very long time, we were essentially manipulated into amplifying those energies. Well, then look at the world that we created. So we have moved out of this into this. So the next card we have here is Council of Light, divine orchestration, helpers in the subtle realm. Because yes, as we are here, the bat, moving around in darkness, not really knowing where we're going, using different senses, when we tap into those different senses, we realize that we have a whole collective of helpers, and they might not be visible to us with our physical eyes, but they are certainly there when we look with our spiritual eyes. And so that is why we have been put in the darkness, because we have only been looking through our physical eyes, when what the Most High and the universe are calling us to is to operate through our spiritual eyes. Because humanity has remained dormant for so long because they have only wanted to look through their physical eyes, completely ignoring that their spiritual eye is the most powerful of them all. And that is why the spiritual eye sits at the top of the pyramid, because we have 3 eyes, and it sits at the top of the pyramid because it is the eye standing at the top of the mountain, which allows you to see from a higher perspective and tap in to the unseen realm that has always been here to help you. It is simply that you forgot because you were trying to operate in a realm where your physical eyes can't help you in that realm. Your physical eyes are blind in the spiritual world, which is why we were given a spiritual eye. The next card we have here is Priestess. How are you being called to step up and lead? And this is even for the men out there watching, because you all have an inner priestess. Whenever we conduct rituals as the priestess, because the priestess is who is most tapped into the Most High. This is why in ancient times, the priestesses were the ones who conducted the rituals and ceremonies. Because the high priestess, the feminine, because we hold the womb, we are the ones who can literally bring life into the physical world, bring spiritual life into the physical world. The priestesses were the ones who were most connected. And not to say that the priests weren't, but why do you think in modern times, in modern day religion, when people are being taken more and more away from connecting with their divinity, the priest is the one who is in control? Because the woman has been completely taken out. And that is why when we look to ancient civilizations such as Kemet, that was dominated by feminine principles, the priestesses conducted the rituals. So we are being asked now in the spiritual realm, how are you being called to step up and lead spiritually? And remember, leading spiritually is not the same as how we lead physically, and even what we have been showed about what it means to lead physically is total hogwash. Because when we look at those people who are leading our world today, they have done nothing but lead us into more darkness, chaos, and destruction. So the next card we have here is Mintaken, longing for home. Belonging, because if we think about it, belonging means what we are longing to be who ourselves, our spiritual selves in this physical body. Because why are so many people unhappy? It is because they are disconnected to who they really are. The spiritual self having the physical human experience, the original light workers. Yes, we are longing to reconnect with the waters. The waters, remember, our emotions. We come back to Piscean energy here. It is about connecting to our emotions, because emotions are what navigate how we move through the spiritual realms. When you are in low vibrations, imagine the emotions that you are in this state of being, you're going to have a very different experience that when you are in this state of being. Because when you are in this state of being, you are in one dimension, whereas when you are here, you are a completely different dimension. And we have been stuck in this dimension for too long, but we have the ability to move in this dimension. And how do we do that? It is through our emotions. And this is why emotional healing is so important at this time. People have shunned their emotions for too long, but once we become emotionally intelligent, we start to experience a very different reality. And the next card we have is Double Mission. Light Worker. Again, we had the original Light Worker, because this is, and then here we have Lightworker Starseed. And if you see closely in this card, yes, she's in the ocean and she's seeing the waters, but she's also somehow in space. She's on some kind of other planet. Because many of us, those of us who have longed to be, who have never felt at home, it is because we originally come from the stars. This is what the soul is. We came from another world, a world that is a world where our soul came from. And so we are being reminded here that yes, we are in human form, but we came from the stars. We were seeded in the stars. And this card says double mission, Lightworker Starseed, serve the world by being you. Because when you remember that you were seated in the stars and that you came to resonate joy. I mean, look at these colors. These are the colors we are being asked to emanate, and we emanate those when we are in joy. So what is it that you need to be able to emanate that joy? And yes, we can feel like the world is falling apart, but remember, when we are looking from that higher perspective, when we are looking through our spiritual eye, the world feels less like this and more like this. And the last card we have is Earth School. Life lessons, soul growth, study, higher learning. Yes, because we all came from the stars to Earth, which is a school, so that we could learn many, many lessons, so that our soul could expand. Because yes, what happens is all the negative, challenging experiences we have ever had in our life, they have all served to teach us something. But when we are stuck in victim mentality saying, oh no, poor me, we miss those lessons. We're too busy feeling sorry for ourselves. But when we stop and we look at the challenges and we say, hey, please show me what you came here to teach me. What am I supposed to learn? Suddenly, you're looking at the world through a very different perspective. You're starting to see the world for what it really is, an opportunity for your soul to grow, for you to learn. And interesting, because the first card we had here, ready for new teachings. And here we have Earth School as the last card. So as we went round, we are being reminded that we are all here to learn from one another, to learn from life, to learn through the different experiences that we have. Anybody who comes into our world, they come into our world to teach us. So moving forward, what you can change is, rather than saying, poor me, when life takes place. And yes, it sucks. We've all had challenges and we've all had traumas and we've all had shit happen to us. And it's not hard, and I'm not trying to belittle the negative and difficult experiences that you have experienced. But what I am saying is that when you try and learn from them, when you ask them what they are here to teach you and in what way your soul can grow from that situation, that is when you start experiencing real transformation. And that is when you keep moving higher and higher and higher. And essentially what life is just one great big initiation, so that by the time you die, you know where you're going in the next life. So let us close out this message here. I certainly hope that it has brought you some clarity, some guidance. I wish you support, I wish you love, I wish you strength on your journey. And if you've made it this far and are interested or need further support on your journey, then you can get in touch with me using the details in the description box below. Much love to you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day.